My dad stole my wedding fund for my stepsister's college, so I cut him off financially and let him sink in the humiliation he deserved. I thought my wedding day would be the most perfect day of my life, until my grandfather stood up to give a speech and turned my father into a laughingstock in front of 200 guests. My name is Victoria Langford, and I'm 29 years old. I work as an event manager for a communications company, which means I know exactly how much planning goes into making special occasions memorable. What I didn't expect was that my own wedding would become memorable for all the wrong reasons, or maybe, looking back now, for all the right ones. My relationship with my father, Richard Langford, has always been complicated. He's 58, works as a chief accountant for a private firm, and has this way of making everything about maintaining family harmony, which usually means everyone bending to his will. When I was 15, he remarried Linda, a woman 10 years younger who came with her own daughter Emma. At the time, I tried to be understanding. Dad deserved happiness after Mom's death, and I wanted to give Linda and Emma a chance to become real family. But over the years, I noticed a pattern. Whenever there was a choice between supporting me or supporting Emma, Dad would choose Emma. When I needed help with college application fees, he said we should tighten our belts. When Emma needed a new laptop for school, suddenly there was room in the budget. When I asked to borrow the car for a job interview, he'd already promised it to Emma for a shopping trip with friends. Each time, he'd explain it away with phrases like Emma's adjusting to the family, or we need to make sure she feels included. I told myself it was temporary, that eventually things would balance out. I focused on building my career, saving money, and planning for my future. When I met David 3 years ago, I finally felt like my life was coming together. He's kind, supportive, and treats me like I actually matter, something I'd been missing in my family dynamic. When David proposed last year, I was over the moon. We started planning our dream wedding immediately. I'd been saving for years, putting away money in a special account that my father had helped me set up when I first started working. It was in my name, but Dad managed it since he was better with investments. By the time we got engaged, I had saved $15,000, enough for a beautiful ceremony and reception. Everything was perfect until 3 months before the wedding. I was reviewing our budget when I decided to check the savings account balance. My blood ran cold when I saw the number on the screen. Instead of $15,000, there was only $3,000 left. $12,000 had simply vanished. I called the bank immediately, thinking there must be some mistake. They confirmed that a withdrawal had been made 6 weeks earlier, authorized by someone with access to the account. Since Dad was the co-signer, he had that access. When I called him, his voice sounded strained. "Oh, that," he said, as if $12,000 was pocket change. "I had to borrow it for an emergency." "Don't worry, sweetie, I'll have it back to you soon." "What kind of emergency, Dad? And why didn't you ask me first?" "It's complicated, Victoria. Family stuff. You know how it is." But I didn't know how it was. This was my money, saved over years of careful budgeting and sacrifices. I'd skipped vacations, eaten instant noodles for dinner, and worn the same 3 dresses to every work event just to build up that wedding fund. "Dad, I need that money back. I've already put deposits down on everything, the venue, the catering, the photographer. The wedding is in 3 months. I'm sure we can figure something out. Maybe scale back a little? Weddings don't have to be so expensive these days." Scale back? I was already having the most modest wedding I could manage while still inviting our families and close friends. We'd chosen a small local venue instead of the elegant hotel I'd dreamed of. We'd hired a DJ instead of a band. We'd ordered simple flowers from a grocery store florist instead of a professional designer. "Dad, what was the emergency? Maybe I can help figure out another solution." There was a long pause. Emma needed help with her tuition. The scholarship didn't cover as much as we thought, and the payment was due. "Emma." "Of course it was Emma, so you took my wedding money to pay for Emma's college." "It's not like that, Victoria. I'm going to pay you back. But Emma's education is important, and this was the only way to..." "The only way?" "Dad, you could have asked me. You could have taken out a loan. You could have asked Emma to apply for financial aid or get a part-time job. Instead, you just decided to steal from me." "Don't use that word. I didn't steal anything. We're family, and families help each other. Families also ask before they help themselves to other people's money." I hung up, shaking with anger. But the worst part was yet to come. 2 days later, I drove to my father's house to discuss the situation in person. I found him in his home office, looking through paperwork. Linda was hovering nearby, and Emma was sprawled on the couch in the living room, laptop open, probably working on assignments for the expensive private college my money was now funding. "Dad, we need to talk about the money." He looked uncomfortable. "Victoria, I told you I'd handle it. When? The wedding is 10 weeks away. I need that money now." Linda stepped forward. "Victoria, honey, I think you're being a little unreasonable. Your father explained the situation to me. Emma's education is an investment in her future. And my wedding isn't? Well, a wedding is just one day. College is 4 years." I stared at her, then at my father. "Are you serious right now? You're going to lecture me about investments? I've been saving that money for 3 years. 3 years of sacrifice and careful planning, and you just handed it over to pay for Emma's tuition without even asking me." Emma looked up from her laptop. "I didn't know he was using your money, Victoria. I thought it was just family money." "It wasn't family money, Emma. It was my money. Money I earned and saved specifically for my wedding." My father stood up, his face getting red. "That's enough, Victoria. You're being selfish. Emma needed help, and as her stepfather, I have a responsibility to provide for her education. You're 29 years old. You can have a small wedding and be perfectly happy." "I can have a small wedding?" "Dad, I was already having a small wedding. I cut corners everywhere I could. The only reason I could afford even this modest celebration was because I had that savings account." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before planning such an expensive event." I felt like he'd slapped me. "I planned an expensive event? Dad, my entire wedding budget is less than 1 semester of Emma's tuition at that private school. That's different. Education is important. And my happiness isn't?" Linda crossed her arms. "Victoria, I think you need to understand that being part of a family means making sacrifices. Your father has worked hard to provide for all of us, and sometimes that means putting the family's needs ahead of individual wants." "Individual wants? This is my wedding we're talking about, not a vacation to Europe." "It's still just a party, honey. You and David love each other. That's what matters. Everything else is just decoration." I looked around the room, at my father avoiding eye contact, at Linda with her self-righteous expression, at Emma pretending to focus on her laptop while clearly listening to every word. And I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. I would always be the one expected to sacrifice. I would always be the one whose dreams were considered less important. "When are you planning to pay me back?" I asked quietly. My father shifted uncomfortably. "Well, it might take a while. Money's tight right now with Emma's expenses and the mortgage and everything." "How long? Maybe after Emma graduates?" "We'll be in a better position then. After Emma graduates, so in 3.5 years, Victoria. Don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic, Dad. I'm being realistic. You took my money without asking. You have no plan to pay it back anytime soon, and you're acting like I'm the problem for being upset about it." I left that day knowing I had 2 choices: cancel my wedding or find another way to pay for it. The thought of calling all our vendors, explaining to David's family that we needed to postpone everything, telling our friends that the wedding was off, it was humiliating and heartbreaking. But I'm nothing if not resourceful. I spent the next week calling in every favor I had. I borrowed money from friends, picked up extra freelance projects, and yes, I scaled back even further. The elegant dinner became a simple buffet. The professional photographer became David's cousin with a good camera. The live band became a playlist on someone's laptop. It broke my heart, but I managed to salvage a wedding. It wouldn't be the celebration I dreamed of, but David and I would still get married surrounded by people who loved us. The person I told everything to was my grandfather, Patrick Langford. He's 74, sharp as a tack, and has never particularly liked Linda. When Dad remarried, Grandpa Patrick was polite but distant. He thought Dad was rushing into things, and that Linda was more interested in financial security than love. I called Grandpa Patrick a week after my confrontation with Dad. I was stressed, exhausted, and needed to talk to someone who wouldn't judge me for being upset. "Victoria, sweetheart, tell me what's wrong," he said as soon as he heard my voice. I explained everything: the missing money, Dad's refusal to prioritize paying me back, Linda's lecture about family sacrifice, and how I was now scrambling to afford even a basic wedding. The silence on the other end of the phone was long and dangerous. "Let me understand this correctly," Grandpa Patrick finally said, his voice very calm. Your father took your wedding money without permission to pay for his stepdaughter's college tuition, and when you asked for it back, he told you to have a smaller wedding and wait 3 years for repayment. That's basically it, yes? And Linda supported this decision. She said I was being selfish and that family means making sacrifices. Another long pause. Victoria, honey, I want you to promise me something. Promise me you'll go ahead with your wedding exactly as you've planned it now. Don't worry about the money. Don't stress about the details. Just focus on marrying David and being happy. Grandpa, I appreciate the sentiment, but promise me, Victoria. Something in his tone made me agree. Okay, I promise. Good. And don't mention this conversation to your father. I'll see you at the wedding. The next few weeks passed in a blur of final preparations. Despite everything, I was excited. David and I were getting married, and that's what mattered most. Our smaller, simpler wedding was still going to be beautiful because it was ours. The morning of the wedding, I felt like a princess in my dress. David looked incredibly handsome in his suit. Our families and friends gathered at the small venue we'd chosen, and the atmosphere was warm and joyful. Even my father seemed to be on his best behavior, playing the role of proud father of the bride. Linda had helped Emma pick out a dress that was perhaps a bit too attention-grabbing for a wedding, but I didn't let it bother me. Emma was 19 and still figuring things out. Linda kept making comments about how intimate and cozy everything was, which I knew was her way of pointing out that my wedding was smaller than she thought it should be, but I ignored her too. The ceremony was perfect. David and I exchanged vows that we'd written ourselves, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room. For a moment, I forgot all about the drama with my father. This was my day, and nothing could ruin it. The reception was going beautifully until it came time for the gift-giving portion of the evening. We'd set up a small table where people could place cards and envelopes. David and I had agreed to open gifts later, but apparently some people had other plans. Grandpa Patrick stood up, tapping his champagne glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. Excuse me, everyone. I know the happy couple planned to open gifts later, but I have something special I'd like to present to Victoria right now, if that's all right. David and I exchanged glances and nodded. Grandpa Patrick walked over to our table, carrying an elegant envelope and a small wrapped box. Victoria, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the room. You are one of the most remarkable young women I know. You're kind, hardworking, and you have a strength that reminds me of your mother. Watching you plan this wedding, seeing how you handled every challenge with grace and determination, has made me incredibly proud to be your grandfather. I felt tears starting in my eyes. Thank you, Grandpa. Now, I know that planning a wedding can be expensive, and I know that sometimes families don't always support each other the way they should. His eyes flicked briefly toward my father's table. So I wanted to make sure you started your marriage with the security and support you deserve. He handed me the envelope first. This is a wedding gift from your grandmother and me. She wanted to be here today, but as you know, she's not well enough to travel. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a check made out to me for $50,000. I gasped. Grandpa, I can't accept this much. Yes, you can, and you will. Your grandmother and I have been saving this money specifically for your wedding and your future. We wanted to make sure you had what you needed to start your life with David properly. The room was completely silent. I could feel everyone staring, but I was too shocked to be embarrassed. And this, Grandpa Patrick continued, handing me the small box, contains the deed to the family cabin up at Lake Morrison. Your grandmother and I want you and David to have it. Consider it your first home together, or a vacation retreat, or an investment property, whatever makes you happiest. I opened the box and found the deed along with a set of keys. The cabin was worth at least another $30,000. I was holding nearly $100,000 in gifts. Grandpa, I whispered, this is too much. No, sweetheart, it's not. It's what family does for each other. Real family supports the people they love when those people need it most. Real family doesn't take from each other, they give to each other. The emphasis he placed on those words made it clear that this wasn't just a wedding gift. This was a statement. I looked over at my father's table. His face had gone completely white, then red, then white again. Linda looked confused, and Emma was staring at the check in my hands with wide eyes. Now? Grandpa Patrick continued, his voice getting a little louder. I know that some people might think this is an extravagant gift. Some people might think that young couples should struggle a little, that they should make sacrifices and scale back their dreams. Some people might even think that taking money from a young woman's wedding fund to pay for someone else's expenses is acceptable behavior. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. But I believe that when someone works hard and saves responsibly for something important to them, they deserve to have that dream supported, not undermined. I believe that when someone makes a commitment, they should honor it. And I believe that family means lifting each other up, not tearing each other down. He looked directly at my father. Some people need to be reminded of what real integrity looks like. My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. His face was purple with embarrassment and rage. "You have no right," he started to say. "I have every right," Grandpa Patrick cut him off. "I have the right to make sure my granddaughter is properly supported by her family. I have the right to give gifts to whomever I choose, and I have the right to express my disappointment when someone in this family fails to live up to their responsibilities." The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was staring back and forth between my grandfather and my father like they were watching a tennis match. "This is inappropriate," Linda said, standing up beside my father. "This is Victoria's wedding day. Family disputes should be handled privately." "You're absolutely right," Grandpa Patrick said smoothly. "Family disputes should be handled privately. Financial matters between family members should definitely be discussed before any money changes hands. It's a shame not everyone in this family understands that concept." Emma looked mortified. She was smart enough to understand exactly what was happening, and she was clearly embarrassed to be at the center of it. My father couldn't take it anymore. "This is ridiculous," he said loudly. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this." "No," Grandpa Patrick agreed, "you don't. Feel free to leave any time." And that's exactly what my father did. He stormed out of the reception, leaving Linda and Emma sitting there in stunned silence. After a moment, Linda gathered her purse and followed him. Emma hesitated, looking between the door and our table, before finally mumbling an apology and leaving as well. The rest of the room sat in shocked silence for about 30 seconds before conversation gradually resumed. David squeezed my hand. "Are you okay?" he whispered. I looked down at the check and the deed in my hands, then at my grandfather, who was smiling at me with more love and pride than I'd seen from my father in years. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. "I'm okay." The rest of the evening was wonderful. Without my father's disapproving presence and Linda's passive-aggressive comments, everyone relaxed and had fun. People kept coming up to congratulate David and me, and more than a few mentioned how impressed they were with my grandfather's speech. David's parents were particularly supportive. They'd heard about the situation with my father beforehand and had been appalled. David's mother pulled me aside later in the evening. "Your grandfather is a class act," she said. "What he did tonight took courage, and it was exactly what needed to happen. I feel bad that it happened at our wedding, though. It was supposed to be a celebration. Honey, it was a celebration. It was a celebration of justice and family loyalty and standing up for what's right. I couldn't be happier to have you joining our family." Over the next few weeks, the fallout from the wedding continued. My father tried calling me several times, alternating between anger and attempts at reconciliation. His messages ranged from, "How could you embarrass me like that in front of everyone?" to, "I think we need to have a family meeting to work through this." I didn't return his calls immediately. I needed time to process everything that had happened and figure out what I wanted to say. Linda sent me a long text message explaining that my father was devastated by my grandfather's public humiliation of him, and that I needed to fix this situation if I wanted to maintain family relationships. She also suggested that I should give back some of my grandfather's gift money to show good faith and prove that I wasn't choosing money over family. I deleted the message without responding. Emma, to her credit, sent me a thoughtful text a few days after the wedding. She apologized for the situation and said she hadn't known the money for her tuition had come from my wedding fund. She offered to get a job and pay me back herself, even though it would take years. I appreciated Emma's message, but I could see that she was caught in the middle of an impossible situation. She was 19 years old, trying to get an education, and had become the unwitting center of a family drama that wasn't really her fault. 2 weeks after the wedding, I finally called my father back. I'd thought carefully about what I wanted to say, and I'd discussed it with David and my grandfather. "Dad," I said when he answered, "I think we need to talk." "Victoria, thank God. I've been so worried about our relationship. What your grandfather did was completely inappropriate, and I hope you realize that." Actually, Dad, I wanted to talk to you about what you did, not what Grandpa did. Silence. I've been thinking about this situation for 2 weeks now, and I've realized some things. First, you took my money without asking. That's not okay, no matter what the reason was. Second, when I asked for it back, you refused and told me to scale back my dreams instead of finding another solution. That's not okay either, Victoria. I explained the situation. You did explain it, Dad. You explained that Emma's needs were more important than mine. You explained that I should be happy with less so that she could have more. You explained that my feelings and my dreams didn't matter as much as keeping Linda happy. That's not what I meant. Maybe not, but that's what you did. And when Grandpa called you out on it publicly, you got angry at him instead of recognizing that you were wrong. Another long silence. What do you want from me, Victoria? I want you to understand that what you did was wrong. I want you to acknowledge that you violated my trust and hurt me deeply. And I want you to understand that our relationship has changed because of this. Changed how? I love you, Dad, but I can't trust you with my finances anymore. I can't trust you to prioritize my needs equally with Emma's. And I can't trust you to respect my decisions as an adult. So what does that mean? It means that David and I are going to handle our own money from now on. It means that I'm not going to be your go-to person when you need financial help. And it means that I'm going to be much more careful about how much I share with you about my personal life. Victoria, you're overreacting. This was one situation. No, Dad, it wasn't. This was the final situation in a long pattern of you putting Emma's needs ahead of mine, and I'm done with that pattern. The conversation didn't end well. My father was angry and defensive, and I was tired of trying to make him understand something he didn't want to understand. But the conversation did give me clarity about what I wanted my relationship with my father to look like going forward. I wasn't cutting him out of my life completely, but I was establishing boundaries that protected me from being taken advantage of again. David and I used my grandfather's gift to buy a beautiful house in a neighborhood we loved. The cabin at Lake Morrison became our favorite weekend retreat. With the financial security my grandfather had provided, I was able to cut back my working hours and start my own event planning business. 6 months after the wedding, Emma called me. She'd gotten a part-time job and had applied for additional financial aid. She wanted to start paying me back for the tuition money, even though I'd never asked her to. I know it was my dad who took your money, not you, I told her. You don't owe me anything. I know I don't legally owe you anything, she said, but I morally owe you everything. That money was for your wedding, and I benefited from taking it away from you. That's not okay. Emma ended up paying me back $50 a month for 2 years. It was a tiny amount compared to what had been taken, but it meant everything to me because it showed that she understood the principle involved. My relationship with my father slowly improved over time, but it was never the same. He eventually apologized for taking my money, though he never quite admitted that his priorities had been wrong. Linda and I maintained a polite but distant relationship. The biggest change was in my relationship with my grandfather. We became closer than we'd ever been before. He told me later that he'd been watching my father's behavior toward me for years and had been looking for the right opportunity to address it. I couldn't stand watching him treat you like you didn't matter, he said. You deserved better, and somebody needed to make sure you got it. A year after my wedding, my grandmother passed away. In her will, she left me an additional inheritance with a note that said, "For my granddaughter Victoria, who has always had the strength to stand up for herself and the grace to forgive others. Use this to build the life you deserve." Looking back on that wedding day, I realized that my grandfather didn't just give me money and property. He gave me something much more valuable, the knowledge that I deserved to be treated with respect, and that it was okay to expect that treatment from the people who claim to love me. That day, I learned that sometimes the people you think will protect you are the ones you need protection from. And fortunately, there are always people who truly love you, ready to stand up and defend you when it matters most. My father had spent years teaching me to accept less than I deserved, to sacrifice my dreams for other people's convenience, and to feel guilty for wanting things for myself. But my grandfather taught me that love doesn't require sacrifice of your dignity, that family should lift you up rather than tear you down, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's bad behavior. I'm grateful for both lessons, even though one was much more painful than the other. Because now I know the difference between people who love me enough to help me succeed and people who love me only as long as I don't inconvenience them. And that knowledge has made all the difference in building the life I actually want to live.